I was sitting in a cafe in Paris last week, and I couldn't help but notice a group of teenagers at the table next to me. It was a scene you've seen 1,000 times, right? 4 kids, maybe 14 years old, sitting in total silence. Their faces just illuminated by that blue light from their iPhones as they scrolled through TikTok and Instagram. They weren't talking, they were just consuming. A few tables over, an older man was watching them, just shaking his head. We struck up a conversation, and he told me something that really stuck with me. He said, in France, we have laws for everything. How long you work, what kind of cheese you can call brie, even how many French songs must play on the radio, but for this. Mm-hmm. And he gestures to the silent teenagers. For this, we gave them the keys to the kingdom and just hope for the best. And he looked genuinely worried. I mean, not like a Luddite-hating technology, but like someone watching a slow-motion accident. He pulled out a newspaper and pointed to a headline about the National Assembly. Finally, he said, the adults are back in the room. What he was referring to is this seismic shift that's happening right now in the French government, a move so aggressive it's sending shockwaves all the way to Silicon Valley. While most of the world is still, debating screen time over dinner, France just took a vote that could effectively erase an entire generation from social media. We aren't just talking about a suggestion or some kind of parental guide here. We're talking about a near total ban for anyone under 15, and it's backed by a president who recently declared our children's brains are not for sale. The fascinating part isn't just the law itself, but this sudden, really sharp pivot in the global mood. For years, we treated social media like a public park. France is now treating it like a regulated substance. It raises a really chilling question. Did we accidentally conduct a decade-long experiment on our children, and are we only now realizing how much it cost us?
That phrase, a decade-long experiment, it really lands, doesn't it?
It does.
It implies we didn't even have a hypothesis. It's like we just threw a bunch of chemicals in a beaker and, just waited for the explosion.
And the explosion happened.
Oh, the explosion has definitely happened.
Yeah.
If you look at the landscape of developmental psychology and this sort of legislative panic right now, we are absolutely walking through the debris field.
It really feels like the mood has shifted. I mean, a few years ago, if you talked about banning social media for teenagers, you sounded like you wanted to ban rock and roll or something.
Right. A moral panic.
Exactly, a moral panic. But that man in the cafe, he didn't seem angry at all. He seemed resigned. Like the experiment had failed, and now we just have to clean up the mess. But before we get into the politics of the French ban, which is fascinating and really messy, I want to understand the why now. Is this just about kids staring at screens, or is there something, biologically incompatible going on here?
To really understand the why, we have to completely ignore the technology for a moment. Forget the iPhone, forget the algorithm, forget TikTok. We have to look at the human animal. The core argument that's driving this shift, it isn't about technology, it's about biology. It's about a concept called evolutionary mismatch.
I've heard this term thrown around. It's the idea that we're essentially, cavemen in suits, right?
Yes, but it's a bit more specific than that. An evolutionary mismatch happens when an environment changes much faster than an organism can adapt to it.
Okay.
So traits that were once incredibly beneficial, traits that literally kept you alive on the savannah, suddenly become maladaptive. They become harmful or even lethal in this new environment.
Okay, but hasn't that always been true? We adapted to agriculture. We adapted to living in giant cities with millions of people. We even adapted to driving cars at 70 miles per hour. We're pretty adaptable creatures. Why is social media the one thing that, breaks the camel's back?
We are adaptable, but you have to look at the timeline. Our brains, the actual hardware, finished their major evolutionary architectural work in the late Pleistocene era, a very long time ago. We're talking roughly 100,000 years ago. That brain is designed for a very, very specific social environment. The small nomadic tribe, what scientists call the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness, or the EEA.
EEA.
Now, compare that 100,000-year timeline to the speed of the digital revolution. We introduced the first iPhone less than 20 years ago. In evolutionary time, that's not even a nanosecond. We just haven't had time to adapt.
So what's the specific mismatch then? Because I'm assuming it's not just about, bright lights hurt our ancient eyes.
No, it's about the social brain. Let's use diet as an analogy first, because I think it's the easiest way to really grasp the mechanism.
Okay.
So in the ancestral environment, calories were incredibly scarce. Sweetness, like finding a ripe fig or a honeycomb, that was the holy grail. It meant dense energy. It meant survival.
Right. It was a huge win.
And so evolution coded a very simple, very powerful instruction into our brain. If you find sweet, Eat as much as you possibly can immediately.
Because you might not find it again for another week or a month.
Exactly. That instruction saved our lives for 99,000 years. But now you drop that same brain with that same instruction into a modern supermarket.
Boy.
You are surrounded by refined sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and infinite supply of calories. The environment changed, but the ancient instruction didn't. So we eat the donut, we drink the soda, and we get obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Survival trait became a death sentence.
Okay, I follow the sugar analogy. It's a classic for a reason. But how does that map onto something like Instagram? What is the high fructose corn syrup of social media?
Connection, status. We are what's known as obligate social animals. We have to be social to survive.
We need
the group. In the Stone Age, you could not survive alone. A lone human was a dead human eaten by a leopard or starved to death. Your survival depended entirely on being accepted by the tribe. So we evolved something called a sociometer.
a sociometer, like a Geiger counter for your popularity.
It is an internal, unconscious monitoring system. It's constantly scanning the environment for cues of social acceptance or rejection.
All the time.
Constantly. It's asking, did they laugh at my joke? Did they share their food with me? Are they looking at me with respect or with disgust? When the sociometer detects acceptance, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin. You feel good, you feel safe.
And when it detects rejection.
It releases cortisol, the stress hormone.
Yeah.
You feel anxiety and you feel pain, real neurological pain.
And that pain was necessary. It was like the warning light on your car's dashboard saying, hey, fix this relationship with grog or you're going to get kicked out of the cave and die.
The pain was an adaptive, life-saving signal. The sociometer was calibrated for a very specific capacity. This brings us back to what you mentioned earlier, Dunbar's number.
To the 150 people.
Exactly. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar figured out that based on the size of our neocortex, humans can only really maintain about 150 stable relationships.
I've heard that number cited a lot, but that's the absolute upper limit, right? It's not like you have 150 best friends.
No, it's the upper limit of the tribe, the people you'd recognize and have some social context for. But inside that, there are layers. You have about 5 intimate loved ones, your core group.
Your family, your partner.
Right. Then maybe 15 close friends, 50 people you'd invite to a big party, and then 150 people you know well enough to stop and chat with if you saw them.
Yeah.
And the Pleistocene, your sociometer only had to track those 150 people. And crucially, the feedback was transparent and immediate. If Grog was mad at you, you knew it. You could see it on his face. You could probably fix it.
We took a finely tuned system built for 150 people, and we plugged it directly into the World Wide Web.
We plugged it into a network of billions. Social media completely collapses all those layers. A weak tie, a complete stranger you've never met from another continent can now impact your sociometer just as hard as a strong tie, like your best friend.
Wow.
So when a teenager posts a video on TikTok, their brain is subconsciously expecting feedback from their tribe. But instead of getting a nod from a neighbor, they might get 10,000 anonymous comments from strangers. Or, and this is perhaps worse for the sociometer, complete silence from millions.
The silence must be deafening. I mean, if you're evolutionarily wired to think rejection equals death, and you post something that gets 0 interaction, your ancient brain interprets that as the entire tribe is ignoring me. I am in mortal danger.
That is the physiological reality. The anxiety isn't just teenage drama, it is a genuine survival panic. And to make matters so much worse, the feedback isn't just about volume, it's about something called supernormal stimuli.
Supernormal stimuli. That sounds like a superpower, but I'm guessing it's not a good one.
It's a concept from mythology, the study of animal behavior. Nicholas Tinbergen, a Nobel Prize winner, did these amazing experiments with birds. He found that if he painted a fake egg with brighter colors and larger spots than a real egg, the mother bird would abandon her own actual eggs to sit on the fake one.
So she chose the fake one over her own kids.
The artificial signal was just louder than nature, it was more intense, and it completely hijacked the bird's hardwired instincts.
So let me guess, we are the birds and the like button is the giant, shiny plastic egg.
Pornography is a supernormal stimulus for sexual selection. Junk food is a supernormal stimulus for our foraging instincts. And social media likes, follows, and view counts are incredibly potent supernormal stimuli for social status.
Why are they so potent?
Because they quantify reputation in a way that never ever existed in nature. You never walked around the village with a number floating over your head showing exactly how popular you were compared to everyone else.
That quantification is just brutal. It turns your entire social life into a scoreboard. And if there's a scoreboard, that means you can lose.
And you almost always feel like you are losing. This leads directly to another biological concept, resource holding potential. In the wild, animals, and humans are animals, constantly assess their ability to hold on to resources or attract mates. And they do that by comparing themselves to the immediate competition.
Right. If I'm a hunter in a small village, I compare myself to the other 10 hunters in my specific village. If I'm decent, I feel pretty good about myself. My status is secure.
But on Instagram, you aren't comparing yourself to the village. You are comparing yourself to the curated, filtered, airbrushed highlight reels of the global elite.
Not even their real lives, their fake lives.
Their best moments, professionally lit and edited. You are comparing your body to a model who has a team of stylists and Photoshop artists. You are comparing your vacation to a billionaire's trip on a private jet. This creates a constant state of relative deprivation.
Relative deprivation.
It's the feeling that you are failing, even if you are objectively doing fine, because your comparison target is artificially and impossibly inflated. Your sociometer just crashes. It screams, you are failing. You are at the bottom of the hierarchy. You are worthless.
So the brain is constantly screaming crisis when there is no actual crisis, just because the reference points are totally, completely skewed.
And this constant state of perceived crisis, this chronic stress and anxiety, it literally changes the architecture of the developing mind. This brings us from the general theory to the specific mechanisms of harm. We aren't just talking about a vague sadness anymore. We are talking about encoded, measurable behaviors like SCFS.
SCFS. And I'm social comparison and feedback seeking. It sounds very clinical, but let's break that down. Is this different from just, checking your phone?
It is critically distinct. Using your phone to look up a bus schedule or text your mom is utilitarian. It's a tool. SCFS is when the motivation is specifically to assess your social standing. It's the am I good enough loop.
The constant self-auditing.
Yes. It involves actively seeking out content that makes you compare yourself to others, or posting content with the specific goal of harvesting validation in the form of likes and comments.
I think everyone has done this. You post a photo, and then you check it 5 minutes later, then 10 minutes later. And if it has no likes after an hour, you feel that pang of embarrassment and you delete it.
That behavior is the SCFS loop in action. But for a 14-year-old whose prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and emotional regulation, is still under construction, this loop is devastating. There was a major longitudinal study, this is the gold standard of research, where they follow the same kids over years, that tracked this very thing.
What did they want to find out?
They wanted to know, does social media cause depression, or do depressed kids just use more social media?
That's the classic chicken and egg question, right? Tech companies always argue it's the latter, that sad kids are just seeking community online.
The data paints a much darker picture. It found a bidirectional relationship, which means it goes both ways. But specifically, it identified a depression loop. What it found was that depression at time 1 predicts a future increase in SCFS at time 2.
So feeling bad makes you check more.
Exactly. A child feels low or anxious or lonely. They turn to social media to self-soothe or to seek reassurance. They're essentially asking the digital tribe, am I okay? Do you still like me?
But because of that relative deprivation we just talked about, the platform doesn't give them reassurance.
No. The algorithm feeds them images of everyone else having a seemingly better life. Perfect bodies, amazing parties, happy relationships.
So they go in looking for a hug, and the algorithm basically hands them a mirror that says, you're a loser.
And that rejection, or even just the perceived rejection of not enough likes, it deepens the depression, which in turn drives them back to the platform to try again, hoping for a different result. It becomes this compulsive, vicious cycle of negative reinforcement.
That's horrifying.
And there is a nuance here regarding gender that is often missed in the public conversation. We talk a lot about girls and body image, which is absolutely valid and supported by tons of data. Girls tend to engage in what's called co-rumination.
Obsessing over problems together.
Exactly. Obsessing over problems, often amplifying anxiety, and they internalize the comparison more. But the effect on boys is often ignored or completely misunderstood.
Yeah, I feel like the narrative is always Instagram gives girls eating disorders, but we rarely hear about what it's doing to boys. Is it just that boys don't care as much about what people think?
Well, boys care deeply about status, maybe even more so. But the mechanism of resource holding potential expresses itself differently. For males in many primate species, including our own, status is historically linked to dominance, risk-taking, and demonstrating fearlessness.
The tough guy.
The tough guy, the provider, the warrior. So the research introduces a really interesting construct called digital status seeking. And in boys, this specific behavior often predicts risky offline behaviors.
Okay, so getting likes online translates to actual physical danger in the real world.
Absolutely. Think about the viral trends you see. The subway surfing trend, or the skull breaker challenge, or simply filming yourself doing something illegal or dangerous like street racing.
Things that can get you killed.
Things that do get kids killed. Boys are using the digital platform to broadcast dominant signals. Their brain is saying, look how brave I am. Look how crazy I am. I am high status. The algorithm rewards this high arousal, shocking content with views and likes. So you have 13-year-old boys performing life-threatening stunts, not just for the thrill, but because their Stone Age brain believes that this risk-taking will elevate their status in the global hierarchy.
It's the digital version of jumping off the highest cliff into the lake to impress your friends. But now the entire world is watching and the cliff keeps getting higher.
And if you don't jump, you're invisible. There is also something called the safety trap. This applies to both genders, but it often hits boys who are maybe socially anxious or marginalized, particularly hard. They view the online world as safer than the real world.
You can edit your text, you can think about your reply, you can hide that your hands are shaking. It feels like a shield.
It feels like a shield, but it's a trap. Because in the real world, a socially awkward moment, a bad joke, a clumsy comment is witnessed by maybe 3 people. It's awkward, and then it fades.
Right. It's forgotten by tomorrow.
Online, the audience is vast and persistent. The context collapses. If you try to make a joke and it fails, or you try to act tough and you get mocked, it happens in front of a collapsing context. Your school friends, your family, your future employer, and total strangers all see it. The humiliation isn't just local, it's potentially global and permanent. So the safe place becomes an arena of potential global shame.
That is a terrifying paradox. You go there to be safe, and you end up more exposed than any human in history. Okay, so if this is so obvious, if the biology is so clearly mismatched with the technology, why haven't parents just shut this down? That man in the cafe said we gave them the keys and hoped for the best. Why did we do that? Why are parents seemingly paralyzed?
It's very easy to judge parents from the outside, but we have to look at this through the lens of something called fear ecology.
Fear ecology. Okay.
That's like a concept from behavioral biology that explains how animals, including us, prioritize threats in their environment. We're evolved to react very strongly to concrete threats.
Concrete threats? You mean things with teeth? A tiger in the bushes?
Exactly. Things you can see, hear, or smell. A predator in the bushes, a rushing river, a stranger in a white van offering candy. Parents are fantastic at mitigating these kinds of threats. We have stranger danger, we have bike helmets, we lock our doors at night, we track our kids with GPS to make sure they aren't physically kidnapped.
Right. If I saw a guy following my kid down the street, my adrenaline would spike and I would intervene immediately. That's an instinct.
That is a concrete threat response,
Yeah.
and it's very powerful. But digital threats are abstract threats. You cannot see an algorithm. You cannot see your child's data being mined. You cannot see the dopamine feedback loop being carefully engineered by a team of PhDs in behavioral psychology in California. The threat is invisible. It's silent, and it's often disguised as a toy.
It just looks like a phone. It looks like a fun game.
Exactly. So parents are operating with what economists call imperfect information. They see their child in their bedroom on their bed holding a phone. The concrete physical signals are all saying the child is safe, they are at home, they're warm, there are no predators in this room.
But the abstract reality is something else entirely.
The abstract reality is that the child is currently in a gladiatorial arena of social comparison, or being targeted by predatory algorithms designed to addict them, or being exposed to harmful ideologies.
It's like worrying about a shark attack, which is super rare and very concrete, while you're letting your kid chain smoke cigarettes in their room. The cigarettes are the way bigger, more certain threat, but the shark is what feels scarier.
And because parents can't see the abstract threat, they resort to what we call proximal strategies. These are surface-level fixes. Turn your phone off at 8 p.m., no phones at the dinner table, let me check your texts.
I grew up with those rules. Reasonable.
They sound reasonable, but they are completely ineffective against the ultimate cause of the problem. You cannot fight an evolutionary mismatch with a simple curfew. If the fundamental structure of the platform is designed to hack your child's sociometer, then limiting their access to 2 hours just means the child will compress all that anxiety and status seeking into a frantic 2-hour window. Or, more likely, they will just find a workaround.
And they always find a workaround.
This creates the trust versus control paradox for parents. They want to respect their child's autonomy and privacy. They don't want to be a prison warden, but they are slowly realizing that the tool they handed over is not neutral. It's not a telephone. It's a slot machine. And so individual parenting is failing because the opponent, the tech industry, is simply too powerful, too well-funded, and too sophisticated. An individual mother cannot out-negotiate an AI that is designed to maximize engagement at all costs.
This is the moment in the story where the village usually steps in, right? If the parents can't handle the threat alone, the tribe takes over.
And that is exactly how we should interpret the French ban and similar movements around the world. This is not just government overreach, as some critics would say. In this context, it is collective parental investment.
Collective parental investment.
In anthropology, when a threat is too great for a single family to manage, like a pack of wolves or a deep ravine near the settlement, the tribe comes together to build a collective defense. A fence.
So the French government is trying to build a digital fence around its children.
2. The legislation, which is often discussed alongside their broader Digital Regulation Act called the SREN Act, is incredibly aggressive. It proposes a digital majority at age 15. The idea is that below this age, the brain is simply too plastic, too vulnerable to the pressures of social comparison to be exposed to the algorithmic open market.
And the rhetoric from the top has changed so much too. That line, "Our children's brains are not for sale," that's a heavy, powerful statement.
It redefines the child in the eyes of the law. For the last 15 years, Silicon Valley has successfully defined the child as a user, instead of eyeballs to be monetized. This legislation reasserts the biological reality. The child is a developing human.
A protected class.
A protected class that requires biological protection, not just consumer choice. It frames the issue as one of public health. And it acknowledges that the mechanism of social media, the infinite scroll, the quantified popularity, the variable reward schedule, is the toxin itself, not just the bad content.
That distinction is huge, isn't it? It's not about blocking a few bad words or violent videos. It's about locking the addictive loop itself. But, and you knew there was a but coming, this all sounds great in a parliamentary speech. It sounds great on a headline, but how on earth do you enforce it? I mean, I was a teenager once. If you told me no, I just heard, try harder to get around it.
And this is where we crash into the implementation gap. And it's not a gap, it's a chasm. We've seen reports on this, one of them literally titled, "Mind the Gap." And it details just how difficult, maybe impossible, this is going to be with current technology.
So where's the first hurdle?
The current reality of age verification is, to be blunt, a complete joke.
The old "I was born in the year 1900" trick.
The tick box failure. Researchers created avatar accounts for a hypothetical 14-year-old on all the major platforms. TikTok, Instagram, Roblox, Discord. They tried to set up accounts as a child. The result? None of the major platforms effectively blocked them or required any real parental consent at setup. Most just asked for a date of birth. A 12-year-old simply scrolls the year back to 2000 and they're in. It's pure self-declaration.
It's essentially an honor system for a demographic that is biologically wired to push boundaries and test rules. That seems a little optimistic.
It's not optimistic. It's legally convenient for the platforms. They can turn around and say, hey, we asked. They lied. It's not our fault. There is also a massive legal loophole here called performance of a contract. When a kid clicks, I agree, on the thousands of words in the terms of service, they are technically entering a contract with the company. Legally, minors can't sign binding contracts. Yet platforms use this click to justify processing their data without parental consent. It's a legal fiction that everyone just kind of ignores because the alternative is too hard and too expensive.
And the alternative is checking an actual ID, right? But that opens a whole other can of worms. I don't want to upload my driver's license to use Twitter. And I definitely don't want my 13-year-old uploading their passport to a server in who knows where.
This is the core of the technological arms race. You have two main paths for enforcement and both have massive, massive downsides. Path one is hard verification. You upload a government ID, a passport, a driver's license.
A privacy nightmare.
A privacy nightmare and a security honeypot. If that database gets hacked, millions of identities are stolen. It also effectively ends online anonymity, which has been a cornerstone of internet freedom for decades.
Yeah, that's a non-starter for most privacy advocates. So what's path two?
Age estimation. This is where it's really sci-fi and frankly a little creepy. This uses AI to estimate your age without ever knowing who you are.
How does it do that?
It can use different methods. Some analyze your browsing patterns, others use facial scanning. It activates your camera, analyzes the geometry of your face, the cheekbones, the jawline, the distance between your eyes, and makes a statistical guess about your age.
Wait, face scanning? That feels very Minority Report. I have
Yeah.
to let a company I don't trust scan my face just to use an app.
It is extremely controversial. The tech is getting better. It can apparently distinguish a 13-year-old from a 25-year-old with pretty decent accuracy, but it requires you to turn on your camera and let an unknown algorithm scrutinize your biometrics. Even if they promise the data is deleted immediately, it feels incredibly invasive.
And I imagine the tech giants aren't exactly rushing to build these fences for their own platforms.
They are fighting it tooth and nail, but in a very specific, clever way. They are playing a game of hot potato. Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, says, "This is too hard for us. We shouldn't have to check age for every user. Apple and Google should do it at the App Store level."
Meaning, when you buy the phone or download the app in the first place, Apple verifies you one time and that's it.
Exactly. Meta wants Apple to be the bouncer at the front door of the entire mall, so Meta doesn't have to deal with the friction and the lost users at their individual store. Apple, of course, turns around and says, "No, we just provide the store. You're the nightclub. You're the one who has to check the ID at your own door."
So everyone wants the collective parent to be someone else.
Everyone wants someone else to take on the liability and the cost.
And on top of all this tech mess, there's a jurisdictional mess, right? The internet doesn't have borders, but France does.
It works very badly. This is the country of origin loophole, and it's the biggest headache for regulators in the EU. The law says a digital company is regulated by the country where its European headquarters is based. For almost every major tech company, that's Ireland.
Because of their low corporate tax rates.
For tax reasons, exactly.
Yeah.
So if France wants to ban something on Instagram, they technically have to send a letter to the regulators in Ireland and ask them to enforce the French law against Meta.
And Ireland has basically zero incentive to crush the golden goose that's paying its country's bills.
It's a game of international whack-a-mole. We saw this when Germany tried to ban Pornhub, which is owned by a company based in Cyprus. The German regulators send strongly worded letters, and Cyprus just ignores them. It's a joke.
So how is France trying to get around that?
France's As-Ren Act is trying a nuclear option. It's attempting to bypass the country of origin principle by threatening to order internet service providers to block non-compliant websites at the network level, literally telling the French internet providers to cut the cord to those sites.
A French firewall.
A version of it, yes. This is a huge move. It directly conflicts with EU laws about the single market and the free flow of information. We are looking at a potential fracture of the European internet, where what you can see depends entirely on which side of a national border you are standing.
It sounds like an absolute mess. A necessary mess, maybe, but a mess nonetheless.
It is the definitive end of the digital Wild West. For 20 years, the internet was a lawless frontier. The motto was, move fast and break things. Well, things are broken. And now, the fences are going up. The sheriffs are finally riding into town. The implementation will be clumsy. It will be messy. Kids will use VPNs. They will find workarounds. But the signal is what matters most here.
The signal that the great unsupervised experiment is finally over.
Yes. We are moving from an era of user acquisition at all costs to a new era of human protection. We are collectively acknowledging that the Stone Age brain cannot defend itself against the space age algorithm. The collective, the tribe, the state, the parents, is finally, after a decade of damage, admitting that we cannot just hand over the keys and hope for the best.
It just brings me right back to that older man in the Paris cafe. Finally, the adults are back in the room. He wasn't celebrating a perfect solution. He knew it wouldn't be perfect. He was celebrating the attempt. He was celebrating the fact that we are finally, at long last, hitting the brakes on a car that has been speeding toward a cliff for a decade.
And even if the brakes screech and the car skids and all the passengers get jostled and complain, it is infinitely better than going over the edge.
So, as we wrap this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought. Not a question, really, but maybe a challenge. We've talked a lot today about them, the teenagers, the kids, the developing brains, but we are all running the same old software. We all have that Stone Age sociometer. We all have that primal hunger for the supernormal stimulus of a like or a share.
We're just maybe a little better at hiding it, or at least rationalizing it.
Exactly. So the next time you feel that little twitch, that unconscious urge to check, to scroll, to compare, just remember the cafe in Paris, remember the mismatch, and ask yourself if you're the one driving the car or if the car is the one driving you.
And maybe remember that building fences isn't just for the kids. Sometimes even the adults need a gate to keep the wolves out.
I will see you next time.